Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's Link Senior webinar. We're going to give folks just a minute to enter the room and then we will get started. All right, good afternoon. Welcome to today's Link Senior webinar. Today we are providing one free NAB, NCAP, NCCDP, and NZSRDT CEU credit. We are also really happy to share today that this session content is CE pre-approved by NCTRC. So if you need this type of credit, please be sure to indicate that on our post-webinar CEU survey today. In order to be eligible for the CEU credits we are offering, you do need to remain on the webinar for the full hour. At the end of the webinar, I will provide the required post-webinar CEU survey evaluation link in the webinar room chat box, and I'll also be sending that to you by email this afternoon. So please be sure to check your email spam folder in case it lands there. The survey must be completed by midnight Eastern Time this Thursday. If you have questions about our CEU process, please be sure that you read our FAQ page, which I am pasting in the webinar room chat box right now. Remember that your CEU certificates will be issued by email before the end of the day on Friday, April 23rd this week. Again, please be sure to check your spam folder that day. And now I will hand it over to Charles Warren, CEO and co-founder of Link Senior. Charles?
Thank you, everyone. Welcome to today's Activity Strong webinar. It's a pleasure to be back with you. It's a pleasure to introduce you in a few seconds to Kay von Norman, who's the president of an organization called Brilliant Aging, and a few things about Kay in just a second. Our topic today that Kay will be presenting is the power of purpose at all levels of living and care. And before we get started, I just wanted to take a second and pause, and as I often do, thank everybody joining us today for the not only amazing but also essential and chosen work that you do every single day in showing up in your communities despite the pandemic, so that the elders, your residents, can live with purpose. And I want us to be reminded of that choice that you make every day, because obviously things are improving. I personally got my vaccine 2 weeks ago, and things are very encouraging, and it's a spring here in Washington, D.C. But I think that there's also reminders that we're not out of this tunnel yet. I was talking to a friend of mine in Ohio where one of the staff person tested positive even though they had been vaccinated. So the point is here, thank you for the work that you do. As a reminder, we know how important it is, how essential the work that you do is, but also the fact that some of you might be still struggling, and how challenging things continue to be in this pandemic. So thank you for this. And let me give just a quick few words of introduction. Like Megan has shared, I'm the CEO and co-founder of Link Senior. I've always enjoyed the older adults in my life. I'm very lucky to have found my passion in Link Senior that I co-founded a few years ago, 13 years ago. And Link Senior, for some of you that might not be aware of, we started 5 years ago a campaign, a movement called Old People Are Cool, for two main reasons. One is we strongly believe it, obviously, but the second thing is we're not big fans of this idea of segregation based on age. So this movement is all about enabling a discussion, a healthy discussion, that age should not matter. And in the wake of COVID, we also launched a platform called Activity Strong in partnership with NAP and NCAP, and very recently also, I was happy to announce that last month, in partnership also with Activity Connection. And the goal of this platform is to acknowledge the fantastic work that you all do every single day, but also to try to empower you and educate you with the best tools out there. And often the best tools is actually education, which is one of the reasons why I am especially excited about today's presenter. Just a little bit more background on the company that I started. We're based in Washington, D.C. What we provide is a resident engagement platform for senior living. So we serve everything from independent living to assisted living, memory care, and the nursing home environment. We're in 43 states in Canada. And essentially what we do is we provide you with an assistant in the form of an app that would save you time, but also empower you and empower all the care partners and help your organization have this interdisciplinary approach to engage all of your residents. And then in the back end, as we integrate with the electronic health record, we can also help you correlate meaningful resident engagement outcomes. So measuring engagement, but also linking that to very important, obviously, clinical and financial outcomes. So this was actually highlighted in a research study that was published in 2019, where we show and saw these amazing outcomes. So obviously these days, social engagement is a big emphasis for everyone as we try to continue fighting social isolation. So we're more than happy to share with you more about Link Senior if you're interested whenever you want to reach out to us. About these webinars, we started them actually 3 years ago. And as you can see from the slide, this is just a brief sample. We've been blessed, including today, with amazing speakers. We started it because of the simple assumption or comments that we were hearing from staff members that it was very difficult for you to gain access to CEUs and quality education. So we thought it was fair as a way to give back to the industry to help you with education, because we know that in the end, the better education you have, the better tools you have, the better the experience you will create for your residents, which is obviously very dear to us and obviously me, Charles, the co-founder of Link Senior. And I think that the best way to introduce Kay is with this statement that I often try to remind ourselves of, is that anyone in society has a very simple very simple human right, which is this idea of finding purpose. And in the context of aging, one area to think about purpose is obviously to look at different experts, right? And Kay is one of these experts. As I mentioned before, she is the president of an organization called Brilliant Aging. She is an internationally known aging expert. I actually had the pleasure of meeting Kay when I started Link Senior at a fantastic conference that an organization that has a conference called ICAA, which I highly recommend to all of you if you don't know about ICAA. And so Kay has been a leading expert in this particular area and a speaker at ICAA. She directed the Kaiser Institute on Aging. She serves on international boards, speaks and consults around the world, and has an extensive list of publications, including 3 books and scores of journal articles. Kay is living her purpose and passion as a consultant, a lifelong dancer, and believe it or not, as a backcountry horsewoman. And a personal invitation to all of you is to consider Kay's services if your organization, whether you are a one-site organization or a multi-site organization, is thinking actively or will be thinking in the future about elevating the experience to the elders. Kay is one of the experts you definitely want to connect with. So Kay, with this introduction, the floor is yours, and I know you have control of my screen. Please let me know if there's anything else I can do for you. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Charles. Let's see now. I'm pushing the button and it's not moving. So let me see why I can't get your screen controlled here. Huh, I had it before.
Yeah, let me send it to you again.
Okay.
Oh. Remote control to Kay. So you should have it again.
Okay, let's try it again. Let's see what happens here. Huh. Well, maybe you'll have to do it. I can't seem to get it to let me do it. There we go. Got it. Or maybe you did that. I don't know. All right. No, I think, Charles, you're going to have to do it for me. All right. So go ahead and hit the next slide. First of all, thank you so much for inviting me. I really appreciate it. And I have really appreciated watching how you and Link Senior have provided so much leadership over this, from the time you started, but also especially through this whole COVID crisis. Your company has done some amazing things to support this industry. So I want to thank you for that. I usually start with this slide, I guess partly because it shows you a little something about me, and partly probably because it's been a really long winter and I can't wait to get back out on horseback in the mountains. Snowing again today. Someday we will have spring. There's always hope. But one of the other things that I think about when I'm talking about purpose is one of the favorite things I like to talk about. It always occurs to me that what would happen, what would it feel like to lose something I'm very passionate about, horseback riding, dancing, whatever. How would I react? How would I respond? How would I come up with adaptive strategies if I have to give up something that I truly love, that I truly felt a lot of passion and drive around? And so I think that's always kind of in the back of my mind. I think we go through our life, very engaged in some things. And if that suddenly, I mean, any one of us could get hit by a bus tomorrow and not be able to engage in the things that we love to do in the same way that we have been doing them. So when I start thinking about helping people engage in purpose, a lot of it comes from helping activate within individuals those abilities to have adaptive strategies and belief systems that move them forward in life regardless of challenges. Next. And so one of the things that I ended up writing actually 2 articles on purpose-centered senior living. And the first one I wrote in 2009 for the ICA journal. And at that time, there was a lot of talk about purpose, but not a lot going on. And it was very interesting because when I wrote the article asking about the concept of saying, what if we positioned ourselves in senior living as centers for elderhood, with a component of care and housing, as opposed to being all about housing and care with some purpose mixed in. And, talked about elders being able to have all kinds of impact on community, external community problems and issues that need attention. And I had a lot of response from that article, more than I'd ever had from dozens of articles. And a lot of it was very good. But I also got hate mail, which was really interesting. People from the industry saying that I had no idea what people were capable of. These people needed care, that they, because of their advanced age and challenges, they couldn't be expected to participate in purposeful activities out in the broader community. So it was very interesting to see that really broad, just every end of the spectrum mindset within senior living. And so now when I wrote the second article, which came out in ICA journal last year, very different thing. I mean, there's a whole lot more going on in purpose. And so I'm going to share some of those things with you. There's a lot more research on purpose. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time delving into that because I have the link there in the slideshow to this article. So you can download it as a free PDF. You can download from my website. I really encourage you to do that because it has a nice synopsis of research. It has all the reference citations so you can track down research you're really interested in. And it has a lot of the programs that I'm going to be talking about today. So I don't have to sort of regurgitate all that. It's there for you in a really nice, concise package. So I encourage you to do that. And I had Megan also copy and paste that into the chat room. So that link is in the chat room as well. But in general, what we do know, of course, is that purpose is about having a real sense of direction and goals, and life has real meaning. But we also know now with the latest research that wellness is purpose is a tremendous wellness amplifier or magnifier. And not only does it improve life satisfaction and a sense of well-being, but it actually improves physical and cognitive health. And a couple of the research the articles that I really was interested in was how purpose actually buffers the impact of health challenges. And so people with all kinds of health challenges, if they have a high sense of purpose, are able to continue engaging and living life more successfully than those with a low sense of purpose. And one of the things that fascinated me was even in an Alzheimer's study with purpose, they did brain pathology tests, after people passed away, and found that people that had virtually the same brain pathology with Alzheimer's, tangles, and all of that that's going on, the people that had a high level of purpose actually declined 30% less than those who had a low sense of purpose. So think about that, the actual brain pathology showing that they had the very same level of disease progression, and yet they were able to live a much different life because of purpose. So I think that's really important. And they also found in that study, it was the Rush memory study, it was called, is that purpose is the most robust predictor of late life well-being than anything else that we know that supports well-being. So even better, more robust predictor of what late life well-being than physical activity, than social engagement, than cognitive training. And so that's a really important thing to understand and know, that it's no longer just about life satisfaction and a sense of well-being, but it really is about the huge impact it has on health and well-being. One of the most fascinating studies that I found was the difference between what they call eudaimonic and hedonic well-being. And eudaimonic meaning being described as people living with a very deep sense of purpose, sort of the Mother Teresas of the world, who are just completely immersed in purpose, and that's where they derive their happiness from. As opposed to hedonic being, I'm maybe they called it the celebrity lifestyle. I'm having a lot of wonderful positive experiences in my life, I'm enjoying my life, etc. But what they found on the metabolic level was that people with eudaimonic well-being, high levels of that kind of well-being, had a very low levels of inflammation and high levels of gene expression around fighting viruses and all kinds of things like that. Whereas it was just the opposite with people in the hedonic well-being. They had high levels of inflammation and low levels of like fighting off viruses and stuff. And I find that very fascinating, and it's a really a neat research article. But think about that for a minute. It almost seems that the human genome is designed to function more efficiently and better when people have a high sense of purpose. Okay, next slide, please. So one of the things that I also learned as I was going through this process, again, I've been talking about and writing about purpose for, probably 15 years. And during this time, my mom, this is my mom, Nora Bell, and she had always lived on a ranch, been a ranch woman, driving the tractors and, raising cattle and climbing fence posts and driving the four-wheeler around like a crazy person. And she had a brain aneurysm in her 70s. And we were all just couldn't believe how bitterly yet faithfully she followed this aging script in her brain about what she was capable of after she'd had a stroke in her 70s. And so, we were constantly trying to get her to re-engage in life because physically and cognitively, she came out of it pretty well, but emotionally, it was a whole different story. We'd say, hey, Mom, come out and drive the four-wheeler, or come out and do this for fun, or come out and do that. And she'd say, no, I can't, I've had a stroke. And so it was really fascinating, because finally one day I called her and I said, Mom, if you could come out and drive the four-wheeler while I walk around the 80 acres and pull up the electric fence posts, and you were behind me, and I could just put those on the four-wheeler, you'd save me miles of walking. And without hesitation, she said, what time should I have them bring me? And it was like, oh, for crying out loud, how could I have missed that? That what I gave her the opportunity to help me to do something for someone else. And immediately she was excited about that opportunity. None of the things about having fun resonated with her, but the opportunity to be of value resonated. And so I think it's very easy, and until you can know this stuff intellectually, But until you internalize it completely, it's easy to have blind spots. I mean, I couldn't believe it took me that long to come up with that solution, to say to Mom, come and help me. And as she was driving the four-wheeler, she said, it feels so good to do something for someone else. And it's, of course it does. And next, please. And so when I look at some of the new things that have come up since writing the article, when I was writing the article, I did a lot of research, and I love what an organization called Abashu, created by Emmy Kyoto. And what she has done is empowered elders as leaders and change agents to mobilize relief efforts, especially when there's all kinds of disaster striking in areas. And for example, when they had the massive earthquake and tsunami in Japan, the group helped mobilize the elders there to lead in the recovery effort. So they helped rebuild a community center. They grew gardens. They had meals for people, and they were really just this shining example of resilience and rebuilding community after disaster. And when the same thing, the typhoon happened in the Philippines, there were elders from Japan who actually went over to the Philippines and helped them mobilize to rebuild their communities as well. And the thing that I really respect about this organization is that there's no preconceived limits, either through an ageist mindset or an ableism mindset. There's no preconceived limits of what they believe elders could do in these situations. And if you look at some of the videos that they have on their website, one of them really struck me, and it was in Japan, a woman who is obviously has severe back problems because she's, kind of bent over as she's walking, but it didn't stop her from, lifting and carrying and gardening and doing all the things that she wanted to do to be, purposeful and help in that situation. And in Nepal, when they created this Abashu in Nepal, one of the core ingredients of it was what they call the old age home in Nepal, where they were intimately involved with helping the community recover. And they really focused on traditions and music and dance of the culture and intergenerational things to try to kind of hold dear rebuilding the cultural aspects of the community as well. So I think that's a great model. It's not having preconceived ideas of what people can and cannot do due to age or challenges. Next, please. And so I think I look at that as an opportunity. If we can reframe senior living, what would happen if we truly reframe senior living as rather than just a place for housing and care? If we reframed it as a senior living as a mobilizer, as a partner in the broader community. And yes, there's a housing and care component, but what would that look like if our main focus was how do we help elders be elders in the broader community and within their own walls as well? And it's going to take a whole change of mindset, staff resident partnerships, that everything is blended. You don't get rid of hospitality and activities, of course, and amenities, but having that purpose as a foundational piece through all of it, I think is critically important. And I think that if we looked at it, what would happen if instead of finding a site and then creating the site plan and building the building and then doing the marketing and sales and having people move in and then creating programs that had purpose infused in them, what if we started with the purpose? What if we worked with the broader community to say what are the greatest needs and desires, and then identified a site that supported that purpose, built a building to support that purpose, marketed and hired to bring people together that were passionate about that purpose? I just think that it would be a completely different environment. Next, please. And so if you think about that, next slide. Yeah, thanks. So I think in order to do that, we absolutely have to overcome age bias. We absolutely have to overcome the idea that somehow just because people are not living in their own home somewhere independently and may need a little support for something, that there's only certain, okay, here's your list of what you're capable of. We have to overcome that. Next. And so I think that my philosophy has always been that age itself has less to do with who a person is and what they're capable of than almost any other single factor. And so if we really, really believe that, then it's easier to embed a mindset of possibilities regardless of age or challenges. Next, please. And I think that one of the things that has struck me is how much we have to learn from the disability movement. And if you look back 40 years or so, when children were born with disabilities, they were often institutionalized. And they were, they were housed and they were fed, but they really weren't given any opportunity to grow and learn and give and do anything, because the expectation was that they weren't capable of those things. And it wasn't until the disability movement changed attitudes and expectations and environments that we recognize what a tragic waste of human potential that was. And so now you have young people with profound disabilities who do amazing things. This young man actually lives in Bozeman, Kevin Conley, born with no legs. And as a young man, he traveled all over the world on his skateboard. That's how he gets around, by himself on his skateboard. Imagine, getting on planes, doing everything he had to do to travel. And he took pictures of people's first reaction to him as they saw him going by on a skateboard in all these different countries. And his book is fascinating. It's called Double Take. I highly recommend it because it really speaks to, the immediate impression somebody has of someone else. You, based on your own experiences in life, what do you decide that has happened to them? What do you decide they're capable of? It's a fascinating book. But what strikes me is that now young people with disabilities are given resources, tools, and encouragement to overcome those challenges and live fully in spite of them. And yet, so often with older adults that have challenges later in life, they're instead given tools to cope with the challenges. And they make their world smaller, more manageable. And think about the difference in mindset between overcoming and coping. Profoundly different mindset that results in profoundly different outcomes. So I think that it's so critical that we get into that mindset and belief system of adaptive strategies and possibilities, regardless of challenges, regardless of age. Next, please. So I'm going to do something with you. I'd like you to do this with me. And if we're in a group together, what I'd usually do is I have everybody stand up. So if you're in a place that you can stand up, please do that. I'm not going to do it, or you just see my belly button, so that wouldn't be very attractive. But anyway, it's going to be a series of yes or no questions. And you'll either stay standing or sit down based on the answer. And so, do you expect to be healthy and active through your full lifespan? If you say no, please sit down. Do you expect to be at least as strong and agile 5 years from now as you are today? If you say no, please sit down. Do you strength train or do moderate to heavy lifting on a regular basis at least twice a week? If you said no, please sit down. Now, in the past 2 weeks, have you made a joking or serious reference to have your physical performance being diminished by age? If you said yes, please sit down. In the past 2 weeks, have you made a joking or serious reference to having a senior moment when forgetting a name or a fact? If you say yes, please sit down. So now everybody can go ahead and sit down. But my question to you is, I wonder how many people were still standing? If you want to put it in the chat, that would be great. Just and Megan can kind of give us an update in a minute. But what this is supposed to do, first of all, when I do this in large groups, if you have 100 people, that it's very common to only have a handful, maybe a half a dozen people still standing at the end of, I usually have a 10 question questionnaire. And it doesn't seem to matter what age group there is, whether it's residents in a senior living community, whether it's staff, whether it's mid-level professionals, even the International Positive Aging Conference I spoke at, I really expected there to be most everybody standing. And instead, there was just a handful of people standing. And what this is supposed to be telling you is what you're saying about aging well, what you're thinking about aging well, and what you're actually doing about aging well. Because if you say, oh yeah, I expect to be as strong and agile 5 years from now as I am today, and you're not strength training, I guarantee you, you're losing muscle mass and strength. I guarantee you. And if you're making, jokes or serious reference to, oh, now that I'm 50, I can't do this or I can't do that. Those are scripts that are running in your brain that you're following through. And if you are making the senior moment comment, it's one of my pet peeves. It's like I 20 years ago, I was telling people when my kids were little, they used to I used to remind them 10 times in 10 minutes to take their backpack and their shoes and their homework to school, and half the time they'd forget at least one. And so, but I didn't run out and have them evaluated for memory impairment. I mean, and so it's so important that we start looking at what's going on in our brain, and why are we thinking the things we're thinking, and why do we follow those scripts. And so I think it's critically important that we get a handle on our own particular age bias, and also help staff and residents throughout the entire community get a handle on age bias as well. Okay, next slide, please. And so I use this example because it's a very direct example of how expectations drive outcomes. And it has to do with physical activity. And first of all, this magazine, I know it's like 10 or 12 years old, so we're going to forgive Oprah for it anyway. But you look at the title, it says, "Age brilliantly, everything you always wanted to know, but were too tired, forgetful, and cranky to ask." I'm like, oh, seriously? That's so ageist. It's awful. But what really got me, there was an article in this magazine, and it was a woman writing about how her mother, who was 90, had always been very social and loved to go out to lunches and have people over and all that stuff. And she fell and broke a hip. And the whole article was about how their life had changed. And there were two things that really bothered me. One was at one point she expressed how that mom has finally stopped resisting the new normal of social isolation and walkers and all this stuff. And I thought, how sad that you would be relieved that somebody gave up on the idea that there was a different potential outcome. And then the other thing that really bothered me is that she said, we've been expecting this for a while because for the last year, mom has been using the walls and the furniture to help her get around the apartment. And I thought, here she is showing every symptom of physical frailty, and yet nobody did anything. The doctors didn't intervene, the family didn't ask for intervention, and the woman herself didn't ask for intervention. And why do you think that was? Because she was 90. Because people expect when somebody gets to be that age that, they're going to become frail. And what has happened is we have confused common and predictable with normal. It's very common. It's very predictable, but it's not normal. And so I think we really have to hit that hard. And one of the ways I usually do that is, this is one of my favorite slides, because it's absolute proof that age does not cause decline. So if you look at the top one, it's a cross section of the thigh muscle. You can see the white bone in the middle, the muscle mass around the outside, and then the white fat around the outside. And this is at the top is a 40-year-old triathlete. The middle is a 74-year-old sedentary man. And you can see the very reduced muscle mass in the middle, very high fat mass. And you might expect that if you thought that age equals decline. But now the bottom one is a 70-year-old athlete. And so if you look at the 40-year-old and the 70-year-old athletes, they have the exact same muscle mass. And so again, proof positive that that it's not just age that causes the decline, but age combined with inactivity. And that is so often driven by an expectation, and then just not knowing what to do about it. I'm losing function, and I just accept it as part of the aging process and don't do anything to intervene, or don't have the opportunity to intervene. Next slide, please. Next slide. Yeah, thank you. So I think the same thing applies to the mindset and expectations. If you really think about what we need to do to change this belief system around that, if I have a mindset and expectation that once I get to be a certain age or have certain challenges that I shouldn't be expected to, or I shouldn't expect myself in any way to contribute to the larger whole, that changes what your experience is going to be. And so I think the power of purpose is that it gives you the opportunity to give as well as receive, be of value to self and others, competence and control, adaptive strategies to live and give fully. All of this needs to be embedded into the fabric of a purpose-centered culture. Next slide, please. And a couple of examples, I think they've done a really great job with this. An organization called A Heart to Serve, Rockport Healthcare. They have in their skilled care centers and their assisted care centers, every month, the residents prepare and serve meals for homeless shelters, local homeless shelters. And every person in the community is supported in their ability to provide those meals. So there's teams of residents who prepare the meals. There's teams that serve the meals. There's teams that clean up, but everybody who wants to be is involved in this process. And it's every month. It's just woven into the fabric of the community that they're the senior living communities that support these homeless shelters and serve homeless people. And there's also the senior canine adoption initiative where they take older dogs from the shelters and how to help them find homes. And the residents themselves are completely responsible for the dog. So they bring it into the senior living community. They're responsible to take care of it, clean up after it, take it for walks, help find somebody to adopt it. They're responsible for the entire thing. And what's really amazing about it, again, is that nobody says only people who are, can function independently can do this. So you have people who are in wheelchairs that are walking the dog. And then because they're walking the dog, they're responsible for picking up after the dog, cleaning up after the dog as well. And they've been provided with adaptive strategies to do just that. And so again, it's that mindset that regardless of age and function, you can contribute to whatever degree you choose to contribute. Arroyo Grande Center, they actually have a whole produce and poultry farm that is run by the residents. It's a skilled care center, and they plant, they harvest, and they give the vegetables to low-income people. And they participate in therapy with purpose in this whole farm and poultry farm. It's a fantastic things. Oh, thank you. 140 already. Holy cow. Okay. So I'm going to skip to the next slide. Oh, one thing I want to say about this one. Again, Matthew Lysobi, who started this program, both the Heart to Serve program and Arroyo Grande, he said that there was always challenges with regulators who would complain about mud being brought in from on the wheelchairs, et cetera, but he so believed in the transformative power of purpose that he was able to make his case that it was, the health benefits far outweighed any potential downfall. And so I think that's what we have to be willing to do. We have to be willing to push and keep pushing for what we know is right. Next slide, please. Social farming in Ireland and Netherlands, same kind of a thing. They really actually small farms that and have adult, or actually anybody who has cognitive or functional challenges come to and spend the day in these social farms. And it's like an adult day program where the staff's only job is to help the people who come there participate in the workings of the farm. So, taking care of animals, cleaning up after animals. I mean, it's all of just everyday activities, and that's what it's all about. I'm going to go ahead and skip through if you want to skip to the next one. So if you start thinking about what are some things that you have to offer in your senior living community that could be of value to the broader community. And one of the programs that I dearly love is called a Victory Lab. And it's a woman who created a program where young people in the foster care system at age 18 in the United States are usually just kind of kicked out onto the street and says, good luck with that. And what she did was she paired a senior living community who has, again, what do you have to offer? They have apartments, they have a job. And then she she paired them with the social services agency who could keep providing services to this 18-year-old kid. And the kid themselves would have, the young man themselves would have responsibilities, you know, if they're going to be in this system. But anyway, so now you've got a young person who is going to be kicked out on the street, basically, and out of the system, who has an apartment to live in, who is getting job training, who is getting, you know, paid work for a certain number of hours a week, and also is surrounded by a whole bunch of elders who are there to support and encourage. And so what a fantastic way to use what you have for outreach. And so think about other ways, maybe a commercial kitchen, you know, cooking classes support family nutrition. You have a coffee shop or bistro where maybe young artists and musicians can ply their trade and come in and play or post their pictures. Walking trails, et cetera, et cetera. And I know people are thinking, oh my gosh, COVID, we don't want people coming into the community. And I get that, but I think it would be a grave error to stay in that mindset of separation and isolation from the broader community. I think we have to do better. We have to start thinking about the concept of the dignity of risk, and giving people the opportunity to choose what level of risk they're willing to accept. Okay, next slide, please. And so I think it's, to look at a lot of community programs that are already in existence around theater, art, schools, children's programs, social services like food banks, recycling centers, animal shelters, all those things. But don't necessarily shy away from the hard stuff. Again, don't have this preconceived ideas of what people are willing and able to do. I think that's why it's so important to engage residents in the community in coming up with decisions about what does this community want to really impact? What are the things they want to do to support the broader community? To think that these older people are unable to handle difficult things, and in my mind is very ageist, because think about the things that they have gone through in their life. I mean, this is a generation that went through World War II, the Holocaust. I mean, all of that stuff. And so I think we have to stop ourselves from believing that people are incapable of doing certain things. And so I start thinking about what would it be like to create a purpose-centered community that was designed to serve the broader community. And could you have a living history farm? Could you have, garden sharing, where people, buy in to get garden shares and invite the community from the outside to come in and help. Agri-entertainment like petting zoos and, pumpkin patches and corn mazes and all the, it's so wide open. When you really change your mindset about it, it's so wide open. Go ahead, next slide, please. But the only way that happens, the only way that can happen is if we change the emotional environment within senior living. And that go from a transition of a mindset of just housing and care and shift to a mindset of centers for elderhood. And so I think that it's really critical that we help people understand that they have a say in what matters to them, what impact do you desire in the greater community or in our own individual community. And what are we doing to help people build the right mindset, the positive attitudes and expectations? I think that we have a lot of stuff that's built around helping people make the physical move into senior living. But what are we doing to help them make the emotional, social move into senior living? It's a very different thing. And you've got to think about what the journey that they've been on to get here, because there's a small percentage of people who choose senior living and have thought about it for a long time and really understand the benefits of living in community and all those things. But there's a large percentage that move there because they have to. And so I think to help people see, help people that have, let's say somebody has been having health challenges, there have been some crises, their family has been saying to them for a while, you can't do this and you can't do that, and you need help. And so they finally move into a community, and then suddenly they have people saying to them, oh, you can do anything you want, you can live engaged and active and healthy life. And it's kind of like emotional whiplash. It's like, well, wait a minute, I thought I couldn't do anything. And so I think we have to think about the journey they've been on, and we have to be much more deliberate about creating that transition and helping them make that social emotional move. And if you want, next slide, please, Charles. And so part of that equation is giving them the skill set to thrive in community. Again, think about that for a minute. What are we doing to give people the skill set to thrive in community? And I believe so strongly that you have to help staff and residents and everybody involved in the community understand the shared responsibility of creating a culture of well-being and purpose. It's a shared responsibility. You have to give residents specific tools to live and thrive in community. And what I mean is this, like, for instance, I think about my mother-in-law who's 95. She lives independently right now, but if she moved into a community, one of her biggest challenges would be dealing with difficult personalities, dealing with difficult interactions. She is of that generation of go along to get along, just avoid conflict at all costs. And so she would literally skip meals or not attend things she might enjoy to avoid somebody who was a really unpleasant person, to avoid that unpleasant interaction. So number one, giving her tools to learn how to set appropriate boundaries, to how to navigate difficult interactions, to how I talk about emotional residue a lot. What I mean by that is every interaction you have with somebody has the potential to either be positive or negative. A lot of them are neutral, but a lot of them have that ability to leave that residue on you. So you walk away either feeling uplifted and good, or you walk away feeling, kind of pulled down and a negative feeling. So how do you manage that when you run into those interactions? How do you keep from just carrying it around on your back for the next, days, weeks, whatever? And so there's all kinds of things like that. And you have to give staff tools to deal with difficult personalities and difficult challenges. One example I have is that after a speech I'd given on creating culture, this woman walked up and she talked about how she had to take the bus to the same church twice, each morning, each Sunday, because there was two women who didn't want one woman to ride on the bus with them. And so that's such a sad thing. And one thing that really hit me is that this young woman was not given the tools to deal with that situation, number one, and she wasn't given permission to deal with it. And so I think that just as age is not an excuse to be inappropriate, hospitality is not an excuse to allow bullying and inappropriate behavior either. So we have to get over that mindset, because again, it's definitely a shared responsibility for well-being. And I have this vision that people are given the resources, tools, and encouragement, and at all different levels of the community. So clearly, when you think about a culture, yes, it's really great if the organization can afford a big, culture initiative and all those kinds of things. But where the rubber really hits the road is where all of you people are working, all of the engagement professionals. It's that culture happens at the one-to-one level. It happens between residents to residents, staff to residents, staff to staff. It happens consistently, day after day, week after week, month after month. And so you have to have this grassroots ability to give everybody the tools. It can't be only on the shoulders of the engagement professionals to sort of push the rock uphill and get this person to be active and get this person to get the information. And it has to come from all the areas. So I think about platforms like Link Senior and Activity Connection, and your ability to reach into the communities and touch so many lives. I think in your initial slide, Charles, you talked about reaching 40,000 residents. And I know that Activity Connection, reaches, way more than that. And so it's like, what if all of these people had the tools? What if not only did you did you help residents who are in the community and staff understand these concepts, but what if you primed people before they ever moved into the community? Think about that whole sales process. Think about those sales teams that are interacting with those prospects on a continuous basis, weeks, months, even years. That's a perfect opportunity to deliver consistent content to people so that by the time they do move into a community, you're speaking the same language. Because I think it's a mistake to just let all of that go by and then they move into the community, and then you start trying to change culture and try to help them have a different mindset. We need to start by priming people before they ever move into the community. First contact with the website should have information about that. First, every contact that a salesperson makes with a prospect should have this stuff woven in into the fiber of those interactions. And staff training, continuous staff training on this same concept, because it's not like working at a clothing outlet or a McDonald's. You're working in community, just as people are living in community, and people need to have that language around community. They have to have that language about personal responsibility as we're shared responsibility. And it can't be just like a big club beating them over the head when they move in. It has to be like consistent small messages over and over and over again until it just becomes a part of their being. It's an internalized belief system. Next slide, please. So last thing, again, we do want to have some questions here. Biggest opportunities and challenges. Again, I want to remind you that there's the resource list in that article. So please download that article and use the information in there to kind of open your eyes and open the door to looking at all this different kind of research. And I want to let you know that I have spent the last year and a half, 2 years, really doing a lot of work on trying to make content available. And so I have created a lot of stuff around lead generation tools, things to, library of content to do prospect outreach, engagement wellness libraries, all those kinds of things, the stuff that you need to make it happen. There's the theory that comes from down here, but this is the stuff that comes from here to make it happen. So I'll just leave it at that, because I do want people to ask questions and I want to have a conversation. So thank you. Yeah. That went fast.
Amazing. That is amazing. Kate, just as you were talking, Beth in the chat was saying my power of purpose is now hypercharged, which I think is a great way to summarize a lot of the comments that we've seen there. Kay, I loved your presentation from the fact that you're sharing these very personal moments with your mother, which is a great example, obviously, but then these different resources from national and international organizations, including Ivasho for sure. One of the things that strikes me, and you did a fantastic job at explaining it at the latter part of your presentation, how much this is an organization-wide effort that actually should start even before our elders move into our communities. And obviously we're fans of this concept. Our last speaker, Jill, the CEO of Christian Living Communities, actually emphasized how much that was important. And thank you for sharing these comments about Link Senior. With Activity Connection, with NAP and NCAP, we're very excited about empowering the staff, because often it starts with the staff. And as you know, probably as much as we do, there's just too much turnover right now.
Yeah.
One of the questions that we had, I think we've had a number of questions, but there are questions that came back, and we also saw them in previous conversations with organizations. Lisa Bertozzi actually asked a question that I'd love to ask you, which is, through the pandemic, residents have had to stay in their room, obviously way too long. And the problem with that is, well, one of the many problems with that, I should say, that some of them actually don't want to come out anymore. The staff is in a position where they're just finding it impossible to motivate the residents that can come out. You know, there's a part about safety, but there's also about a part of them wanting. And I don't know if you have any thought to share. It seems to me that this is a major problem. Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, thank you for asking that. I really believe that this whole piece of the puzzle around expectation, belief systems, perceptions is so critical, because right now what I think has happened is that people have the perception that it's, number one, still not safe, you know, possibly not safe to be out in a group programming, because there's just been such a hardcore, you know, constant messaging around how unsafe it is. But as also that kind of, well, you know, I remember I watched the seminar with Jill from Christian Living Communities, where she talked about how quickly the institutional mindset sort of overcame everything. And it was very interesting to me that I think, you know, as people are in their rooms and they're doing this level of activity here, it's almost like, well, this is as good as it gets. You know, I just have to persevere and just do this. And now it's a lot easier to just do this than it is to extend myself. And so I do feel like purpose is even doubly important now, because it's a reason to step out of yourself and to extend yourself more again, because you're needed out in the broader community. You're needed in your smaller community. So I think it really plays a role. There's a whole psychological component to this, to get people to re-engage.
Thank you for sharing that. There were also a number of questions about examples of communities, and in your presentation you actually addressed them. But I was curious myself to know, you know, do you want to give a shout out, or have you seen an organization do a superior job during the pandemic, or something like a story that really stands out for you?
I'm not sure as far as during the pandemic, but again, I have mentioned the Heart to Serve. That organization, I think, has done a fantastic job of really integrating purpose into their everyday occurrences. It's just a part of their fiber of who they are. And I do know that so many organizations that really truly do believe in the value of, you know, whole person wellness and all those things were devastated when they had to take a hard right, you know, U-turn into medical model of wellness. And I think that I, you know, I'm in no position to judge that, because I have, you know, I wasn't in the middle of it. It was a crisis situation. Everybody did the best they could. But I do think we have to have a conscious shift now back into that core belief system of whole person wellness, that the isolation and the protectionism and all that stuff has to fade away and peel away. And we have, as the staff and as the industry, have to be willing to turn it loose as well. Because it's not just the residents who feel that way, it's staff, it's the organizations. I think they've kind of become protectionistic, you know, because they had to, but now it's kind of like, here's the status quo, what do we do to turn it around? And I firmly believe that, again, it comes from the grassroots. It comes from the ability for engagement professionals to reinvest in that whole person wellness model, and to ask residents to be a part of helping that organization reboot the whole person wellness model. I think we really need to turn to residents and ask them for help rebooting that. And again, have to be given the tools and resources to do that across the board.
Thank you for sharing these resources and thoughts, Kay. It's been amazing to see you lead this concept of wellness, and I want to thank you for taking the time to join us and share some of your very valuable time with us today. As a reminder to everyone on the call today, if your organization is about to or in the process of really thinking about elevating resident experiences, and we know that a lot of you are because of some of the things that Kay just mentioned, of us emerging as an industry through this pandemic, please consider reaching out to Kay, who's made a lot of resources available through today's presentation. We will be sharing the deck, and Kay, just so you know, in the chat, there were a lot of questions about some of the things that you mentioned, so I'm sure you get emails. But I want to personally thank you for the conversation and your presentation today.
Yes, well, thank
With
you,
that,
and I do, oh, I'm sorry, I do want to encourage you to reach out to me if you have questions. I'm happy to answer them and provide support. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Kay. And so to every one of you, thank you again for joining us today. Thank you so much for the work that you do. I sometimes, I think that I say too much, but I think it's kind of the thing you always want to say too much. So thank you for the amazing work that you do. As a brief reminder, we have these bi-weekly webinars through Activity Strong, again in partnership with NAP and NCAP and Activity Connection. The next session is actually going to be a great build-up on some of the things that Kay just mentioned, which is emphasizing the staff and how to bridge generation gaps to keep people longer. And so Kara is actually a workforce strategist and just a fantastic presenter. In May, I'm very excited about this presentation. It's going to be a panel led by David Troxel, who is an international expert related to dementia care, and he will be leading a panel with Diane Byrne of Juniper Communities and Melissa Dillon from Rural Gardens. And in June, we have Gerald Cossey, who's an amazing speaker, who's been speaking a lot at different state associations, so you might have heard of him, and he's going to be talking about something that's really dear and near to his heart, which is this concept of companionship culture. With that, I also want to remind everyone of our program on June 22nd. We have confirmed all of our speakers. We're very excited. Registration has started a few weeks ago. We're already, I think, at 500 or 600 registrants for our June 22nd virtual summit, which is going to be 6 hours worth of programming. I am personally proud of what we are putting in front of you, because not only is going to be the education fantastic, but we will have people living with dementia and residents of senior living communities as part of the program, because as we were reminded by Karen Love recently on one of these webinars, nothing about us without us. So like Kay mentioned, how do we include the elders in the discussion? And last but not least, we have a partnership with OHCA to do quarterly kind of life enrichment, lunch and learn, and I'm going to paste now the link in the chat box if you want to join. It is free, and it is a fantastic way for us to all collaboratively get together and share resources. So with that, thanks everyone. Kay, thank you again so much for this fantastic presentation, and have a wonderful rest of your day.
All right, you too. Bye all.
Take care, Kay. Thank you so much. Nice seeing you today.
Yeah, you too. Thank you. Really appreciate it.
I got you, Charles.
You got me. Thank you so much. I